We've got component number 695, the low and reverse clutch piston, and that has 3 seals. They're all considered part 696, A, B, and C. So these will not be reused. So we'll clean this up. It's in pretty good shape. So 695 and then our 3 seals, 696 A, B, and C. Our reaction gear and support are still on the output shaft. We're not sure exactly why they're bound on that. So what we're going to try to do is remove the snap ring. That's component number 686, and then see if we can get some better luck with some of these components, trying to get them off. All right, so this is component 686. And then this is our internal reaction gear. It looks like it's in pretty good shape. That's component 684. And then we're probably going to wind up having to press the support off because it feels like it's getting stuck right about there. Not sure why. It might be dimpled, can't tell. But we'll get it on the press and try to press that out without ruining the output shaft. All right, we're just going to try to press out the output shaft. So here's our output shaft now that it's out of the reaction support. One thing we did notice though is that the bottom is not flush. It looks like it's on an angle here. So not sure what happened here. You can definitely see a height difference. This appears to be the low spot right here compared to the rest of it here. Not sure if this got smashed in with something or something else happened to it. The rest of it looks pretty good, but we'll clean it up and see about possibly replacing that. And then for our reaction support, overall it doesn't look too bad, but there is, it looks like here, after we clean it up, we'll take a look and see if there's no noticeable step with a fingernail, but it does look like it might have been riding against that here, possibly the reason why it was stuck. You can kind of see here, look like where they dimpled it might have possibly notched this. So we'll clean it up, take a look at it after we clean it up with some mineral spirits. Okay, here's our low and reverse components. So here, our one-way roller locks counterclockwise, works clockwise. The race just slides right out. So this is going to be replaced by the Sonex race that comes with the sun shell. We'll just put it off to the side for now. And then we have a snap ring. So here's one of the 677s. So here's our 678, our one-way roller, and that just popped right out. We're going to replace this as well, probably. And housing looks like it's in good shape, no scoring. We'll clean this up as well. Here's our reaction sun gear, and that does have a retaining ring on it as well, so we're going to try to get that off. there's our ring. 671. And our reaction, and you can see this bearing inside doesn't look too bad. Can't feel anything, but we'll replace that as well. So the reaction sun gear is 673 and the snap ring was 671. Then we have our sun shell, reaction sun shell, which is component number 670. That's getting replaced by a Sonex piece. And then we also have this plastic tab thrust washer. That is component number 674. Yep, 674 is thrust washer race reaction shell. That's going to get replaced as well with the Sonex piece that comes with the sun shell. All right, so here is our thrust bearing. That's component number 669. It's called the thrust bearing assembly reaction shaft shell. Put that off to the side. And then 664 is our input carrier gear, and that's got a snap ring. Component number 668, reaction shaft internal gear retainer ring. That's right here, so we'll try to get that out. Of course, that's sitting on top of our 4-planet carrier. And that is part number 662. This appears to be in really good shape. And there's a bearing on this as well, and that's component 663. We'll put this off to the side before we mark that up. First, we're going to try to get that snap ring out. Okay. And then our reaction, and our, let's see, that is 666. 666 is the reaction carrier shaft, and that's got a bushing inside it. That is 665. So we'll replace that. That doesn't look too bad. It looks like a little worn, but not too bad at all. Don't see any major scoring on that. The entire component looks like it's in pretty good shape. And then 664 is our input internal gear here. And this looks good as well. Don't see any deformities on any of the teeth. You can feel here there's no ridges, so it doesn't look like anything was biting on it as far as clutches or steels. I think that'll just clean up. But yep, they all feel pretty good. There's no high or low spots, nothing that's catching the fingernail. And then our 4-planet carrier, these all feel great. No wobbling at all. Up on top, as I mentioned, is component 663, and that is a thrust bearing assembly input carrier to reaction shaft. All right, so the case has come back. It's been cleaned up. We're going to try to remove the third accumulator retainer and ball assembly. We've got a 3/8 threaded screw down into the assembly, and then we've got the vice grips on top of the bolt. I don't have any kind of adapter for the slide hammer to go directly around the head of the bolt, so we're going to try this. We've got a couple of parts that we did take out of the case. On the left is the third accumulator retainer and ball assembly. We used a 3/8 threaded bolt and a slide hammer to pull that up and out. That's here. There's normally a couple tangs inside there that are holding the ball from coming out. That is case part number 40. The replacement is going to be a genuine GM part. It is GM 8634400. And then next to it, this was missing half of the component itself. That's the retainer ball assembly, the double orifice That's for component number 42. There's supposed to be a capture check ball in there. The transmission didn't have one. We actually just used the threaded 3/8 bolt and just tapped it all the way down through. That is, like I said, component number 42, and the GM number is 8663890, and that's what it was supposed to look like. Some folks say to remove it, other folks say to put it back in. We're just going to put this new one back in after we finish cleaning up the case one last time. One piece that wasn't removed earlier is the manual shaft seal, which is this right here. And you should just be able to pull it out with a screwdriver according to GM's documentation. And there we go. And there should be a replacement in the kit, and that should be component number 82 or 83, depending on your parts explosion. The next group of components are going to be related to the input drum. Before we can test the input drum, though, there's a couple components here we can get rid of or take out first. We've got part number 615 is our first one, and that is component 615 is a straighter shaft selective washer bearing. That's 616. So 615 is straighter shaft selective washer bearing assembly. And then 616, another one down here. That is our thrust washer, and that is selective as well.
Almost had that earlier, so we kept on working on it then.
And there should be a number on here, and it is, looks like an 80 something. No, 69. We'll have to clean it up and get a good number on this. So that's our selective washer. That is component 616. So now we're going to test the drum with some air to see if the shaft to drum surface has any leaks. It will be down in here. We would see bubbles coming up next to the shaft. The GM diagram calls this hole, the first feed hole we're going to test here, the 3/4 clutch feed hole. And I've got about 40 psi of air, which is the buzzing sound coming in. Looks good, didn't see any air bubbles down below. Our next one here is considered the forward clutch. Looks good, no bubbles again. And then our top feed hole is the overrun clutch, and we need to put our finger over the previous feed hole. And no air bubbles, so everything looks good, at least as far as the shaft to the drum is concerned. Now we'll invert it and then pull our clutch packs out from inside. All right, so we're going to do those tests again without any hole, without the compressor on. Should be better this time. So here's a 3/4. forward. Nothing again. And then our final test. Okay. Next up is going to be the 3/4 clutch pack, and it's pretty obvious here. The pack is, burnt up pretty bad. Everything is very black and burnt. So the first thing off is going to be the retainer ring, and the ring itself has very little ability to snap back. And that is component number 656. After the retaining ring, we've got the backing plate. And again, it's pretty dark. So the backing plate is component number 655. And now we have our steels and fiber plates, and we can kind of see here that it's coned a little bit towards the center. So here's our first friction starting to burn out here. Here's our steel. Another friction, and again more burning on the inside, and again it's coned as well. The steels and fibers are component numbers 654A and B. Our rebuild kit has all new fibers and clutches, and this one is really bad. It's just about back down. This is supposed to be a fiber plate. It's pretty much down to the metal, and it's coned again. There's another steel. Another fiber that's coned, and the back has material coming off as well. Same on this one, coned up towards the inside. And then we've got the apply plate. Not sure if we're going to reuse this one or not, and we'll have to put a straight edge on it. And the apply plate should be component number 653. So our 3/4 clutch pack is out. It's burned up and shot. Probably not going to reuse any of those components when we rebuild it back. There are no return springs. Looks like the previous build of this drum was done without the return springs. Next up is our Ford clutch assembly. All right, finally. And this is component number 651. And then we should have a selective backing plate next, and that should be component number 650. Not sure if these were burnt as well, and we got a friction here stuck to it. And then we should have, I believe, 5 frictions, 5 steels, which are components 649 A and B, with A being the steels and B the fibers. Probably should have pulled the sun gear and the forward sprag out. It would have made life much, much, much easier. Just realizing that now. This sub-assembly we'll deal with later. Here's our friction, and that should be number 5. And this should be steel number 5. And after that steel, this should be the forward clutch plate. And that should be waved. So this should be a waved plate. So that should be component number 648. And then 647 or 646 rather is the apply plate. Okay, inside the forward sprag assembly was this thrust bearing. So the bearing is component number 637. And then we also have the seal. And this is IP internal parts component number 636. So it's the input housing to output shaft seal. Up next is the overrun frictions. So there should be, I believe, 2. So this clutch looks good. It's got a little bit of, looks like heat. And our steel. And another friction. And a steel. The overrun clutch fibers are component 654, with B being the fibers and 654A being the steels. We've got the input drum and a spring compressor so that we can remove the snap ring, which is right here, which is holding in the spring assembly. So the snap ring is component number 635 and the spring assembly is component number 634. Okay, here's our snap ring. Next we'll loosen the spring compressor, pull the spring assembly out. So the unit's out of the spring compressor now. Here's component 634, the cage. And here's our remaining components, which we're gonna need to take the unit, invert it, and then bang it upside down. Let's see if we can do that. So that wasn't leaking. It looks like it's in pretty good shape. So we'll break these down some more and then we'll mark them up and clean them up. So we're ready to bag the parts here. Here is internal parts component number 632, which is our overrun clutch piston. And then we have 630, which is our forward clutch piston. We're going to dump some of that oil out. And then we have 628 next. And 628 is the forward clutch housing. 626 is the third and fourth clutch spring assembly. 625 is the third and fourth apply. So we're just going to put a tag on it, the apply plate. And then lastly, 623 is the third and fourth clutch piston. Like I said, these all look pretty good. They don't seem too dried out, so I'm not sure why we had such problems with the 3-4. Lastly is the O-ring we have down here at the bottom. So all we have to do is sort of push this and we should be able to hook it, which we did. And then we can just roll it up and out. So this is component 622, which is listed as the O-ring input to forward clutch housing seal. We're going to start working on the sun gear and a forward sprag assembly. The first thing we're going to remove is component 638, which is the overrun clutch hub retaining snap ring, which is this one here. So we just marked it so I know which side was up or facing me when I disassembled it. So just got 638 in the bag. And then 639 is the clutch hub. We're going to take that and put that to the side. And then we've got our forward sprag. The top cover, our sprag, and then the bottom cover. So the covers are 643. And the sprag itself is 642. We'll replace that, even though it looks like it's in good shape. And then we have the outer race, I believe, is 644. Looks pretty good. Don't feel anything. We'll clean it up and make sure that there's nothing going on with it. And then we're gonna pull the sun gear out and then we'll replace the bushings on the sun gear as well. So before we bagged up everything, we did want to go over a couple things. There is a noticeable ledge here on component 639, the overrun clutch hub. So it's definitely felt like it's been worn into. See, it pretty much starts right there and goes pretty much out. So we'll probably replace that. And then our forward sprag is the much maligned SKF. So we'll probably replace that with a bore water unit. And on the inner race, we're gonna have to see after we clean it up, there's a possibility of a little bit of a ledge right in here. So we'll see if that is all the way around. And we did put the sun gear on the planet inside the unit. There's not a lot of play. So these bushings are probably good, but we'll probably just replace them anyway since we got new bushings in our kit. Next, we're going to work on the reverse input drum. First thing we're going to remove is our snap ring. And this is component IP number 614, reverse input clutch retaining ring. And that should be followed by component 613, a reverse input clutch backing plate, which is selective. Here's our plate. And we'll just mark that as which side was facing up real quick. And then we have our reverse input clutch plate assemblies, which is a fiber and then a steel. And those are components 612B and A. So we've got fiber, which looks like it's in pretty good shape. Steel, again, looks like it's in pretty good shape. Another fiber. And then a steel. Fiber number 3. Steel number 3. Fiber number 4. And then steel number 4. And then we should have component 611, the reverse input clutch plate Belleville. And that is coned as expected for a Belleville plate, with the cones going down towards the drum center. And we've got the drum in our spring compressor, and the spring snap ring opening is right here. So we're going to try to get that out without having it fly across the room again. And that is going to be component number 610, the reverse input clutch spring retainer ring. All right, and we'll just mark that as which side was up. And like we said, that is component number 610. So the unit is out of the spring compressor now. And here's our spring assembly. As we said, that is internal component 609. And then we have the aluminum piston. And that is component number 607. And then the seals are 608A and B. And these all still feel as if they're new as well. So this feels like this was probably sealing very well. But we have new seals, new rings rather, in the rebuild kit. And our bushings look like they're in pretty good shape as well, though of course again, we've got new bushings in our rebuild kit. We will get a straight edge to the drum. We can see look like it might have had some heat cycles here with the band, because we do know that 3 and 4 were going away. The only other imperfection we found on the surface, there was one, couple little scuffs here. Not sure if that can be polished out or not. We'll have to see. We'll put a straight edge on it and get some light on it as well to see if there's how flat the surface actually is. We're going to start on the pump, and the first piece that's on the pump is actually part of the internal parts. That's this thrust washer, component number 601, thrust washer, pump to drum. If we flip it over on the other side, we've got that piece there, which is component oil pump assembly 644, the front helix retainer. So that just pops off as well. The next piece is going to be the gasket here.
And that's going to be a little difficult for us. Pretty stiff feeling. We're going to turn the unit back over again.
So trying to push it either direction is pretty difficult. So we'll see if we can get in there. So this is actually considered part of the case and associated components. It's part 05 or component number 5. And then next up is going to be the bolts. There's 5 of them. They're 13 millimeter. They are oil pump assembly component number 233. So I'll try to break them with a breaker bar. So here's our pump and our straightener and cover. And there's definitely ridges across. You can definitely feel some ridges across here. And there as well. There's junk inside it. This appears to be slightly chewed up here as well. So first we'll bag up our bolts. We're going to take the rotor apart anyway just to see how everything looks, but there is quite a bit of trash inside the pump here. And as I mentioned, it's chewed up along here. First up is component 210, the pump vane ring. And then 212 is the actual rotor. And some of the vanes have come out. Those are component 213. If we are able to use this pump body, we're still going to get a kit for the rotor. On the bottom we have component 211 as well. And that is the rotor guide. And then we have another ring, another component 210. This side doesn't feel, well, inside here doesn't feel too bad. But as I mentioned, the cover had some steps to it. I'm going to get the spring out. Just going to use it, screwdriver, cover it up with a chop towel, and then pry against the shaft, or pry against the slide rather, not against the aluminum. So here's our double springs. And those are components 206 and 207, with 06 being the outer and 7 being the inner spring. Our pin is pretty much flush, and it's starting to pop up a little bit now. So here's our pin. Don't feel any steps on the pin. And then our slide should come up. And we have the components that go inside the slide as well, 202 and 201, the oil seal ring and the O-ring seal. And then we also have 208 and 209, which are the pump slide seal support and the pump slide seal, which are here. This one only appears to have one here, and the other component is still inside the slide. One part we almost missed is our pin spring, and that is in here as well. So here's our pin spring. Okay, here's our seal, and that is component 243, the oil seal assembly. And then we will drive out our bushing next. And we're just going to use the press to drive out the bushing with a generic 47 and 44 no driver set. First thing we're going to remove on the pump cover is going to be component 232, which is the screen, and that should include the seal for that as well, the oil pump cover screen seal, so it should be just here. And it's got quite a bit of junk in it, and this will get replaced. It's pretty much for granted that we're going to replace this, but we're just going to go through this exercise anyway. There's a big step off here, but this would have been included in the rebuild kit. Next up is going to be the pressure relief valve, the spring and ball. Alright, so it didn't quite get that the way we wanted to. Should have had the screwdriver in there to stay. Here's our spring and the ball. The ball is 228, the spring is 229, and the pin is 227, so we'll bag all these together. Next up is going to be the converter clutch valve. So the first part of that is inside is the snap ring retainer. Okay, so the retainer is 220, component 221. The retaining ring is 222. Then we have our valve. And then we should have our springs. And there are two, an inner and an outer. The valve is 224. The spring inner is 225. The spring outer is 226. So we've got all those pieces out of there. For that, we'll bag all these together as one unit. Lastly, we're going to need to collapse and remove this cover here. We'll try to knock it down and then pull it out. And there we go. The first component we're going to remove from our valve body is component ID number 340, the manual valve. That's located up here. And we're probably just going to clean this up and reuse this valve. We've turned the valve body over, and the manifold pressure switch is going to be next. And the two bolts, the 8mm bolts that's associated with that. The bolts are component number 70, and the transmission fluid pressure manual valve position switch assembly is component number 69, and they're both part of the case and associated parts exploded diagram. Here's our two bolts, and our rebuild kit comes with a new pressure assembly. So this will get swapped out, won't even be cleaned, but we will clean up these bolts. The next component to be removed is going to be the 3-to-2 control solenoid. That's component number 394. And 395 is the retainer. So we have a solenoid, and then inside is its retainer, and then that's holding in the control valve, components 391, 392, and that's the 3-to-2 control valve and control valve spring. So here's our retainer, 395. And we're going to twist and pull. Here's our solenoid. This will get replaced along with all the other electronics that we're replacing for this build. Here's our spring, which is still together in one piece, and our valve. Up next is going to be the solenoid A, which is component number 367A, the 1-2 shift solenoid. And then we're going to have components 369, the 1-2 shift valve, and then the shift valve spring. Actually, it's 366 and 365. Okay, so here's our 1-2 solenoid and the valve and spring. Solenoid B is going to be next. That's component 367B, the 2-3 shift solenoid valve. And behind that should be the 2-to-3 shuttle valve. And behind that should be the 2-to-3 shift valve. The shift valve is component 368. The shuttle valve is 369. Our shuttle valve is ready to come out now. Had to turn the unit back over again. Here's our shuttle valve. And here's the actual valve. The shift valve, the 2-3 shift valve. Up next is going to be component 377, the pressure control solenoid valve. And that's held in place by component 364A, a bolt, and 378, which is the retainer. And then behind that, we have component 376, which is a bore plug, another retainer, and then 375 and 374. 375 is the actuator feed limit valve spring, and 374 is the actuator feed limit valve. Our retainer and bolt, and our valve, solenoid rather. This will get replaced, like all the electronics as we previously mentioned. And then we have a bore plug that's here with a retainer. Our bore plug is trying to come out, but it's pretty tight from all the material that's in the valve body. Okay, it took a while to get the plug out. There's just a lot of material, old clutch material that was just holding up the plug from coming out the bore. And we should have a spring behind that. And here's our spring. This is component 375, as I mentioned before. The actuator feed limit valve spring. And then we should have a valve behind that. The actuator feed limit valve, 374. So this was 375, the spring. 374 is the valve. The valve did finally get worked out. And again, that is component 374, the actuator feed limit valve. Next is going to be the Ford accumulator and its associated parts. So the first thing we have are 3 8mm bolts. Those are again component number 364. Our cover is component 363. And it is just loaded up with junk. Then we have our spring. And that is component 356. And our pin is in there pretty tight. So we'll have to work on how to get that and the piston out because we have a lot of junk in the bore. Okay, we were able to grab a hold of the pin by putting a towel over top of it and then getting a pair of pliers to hold onto it and wiggling it a little bit, pulling it out. And then we did the same for our piston. And here we go again with a plastic piston. So this is definitely going to be replaced. And we believe we have a new pin as well. So the piston is component 354, and the gasket oil seal is 353. Now that the cover's off of the Ford accumulator, we can also get the spring, component 362, which is the low overrun valve spring, and then behind that is the low overrun valve, and that is component 361. Now that we've removed component 361, the low overrun valve, we can remove components 358 and 357, which are the forward abuse valve and the forward abuse valve spring. They're behind the low overrun valve, and there's a plug separating them and then a pin holding the plug in. So in order to start it with this, I lifted the unit up, used a pair of needle nose pliers to push down on the plug, and then an awl to push up. All right, the camera died while I was doing the last little segment. So we took out the forward abuse valve, its spring, which are components 357, 358, a plug, which is 359, and a pin, which is 360. And in order to get the pin out, we had to push the plug in a little bit and then use an awl to push the pin up from the bottom, and we got it out. Because of the amount of material that was in a lot of the other valves, just decided to pull everything else out. So the next one we're going to pull out will be components 398, 97, 80, 81, and 95. And 98 is the isolator valve, 97 is the regulator apply spring. And then 380 is our regulator apply valve, and then in front of that is a bore plug and the clip, retaining clip. All right, and here they are out of this bore. So it's component 398, the isolator valve, 397, it's regulator spring, and then 380 is the regulator apply valve. We had a bore plug and then its clip. The next that we're going to take out behind this plug is component 382, the 4-3 sequence spring. And that's the furthest one in, followed by the 4-3 sequence valve, the 3-4 relay valve, and then our plug and retainer clip. And we'll show that once we get it all out. Okay, so here's our valve train component that came out of this galley here. 382 is a 4-3 sequence valve, spring. 383 is a 4-3 sequence valve. In front of it is 384, the 3-4 relay valve. And then we had 381, our plug, and 395, our retainer clip. For our next galley, we're going to be pulling out components 385, the 3-4 shift valve, 386, the 3-4 shift valve spring, and then a bore plug and a retainer. Okay, so everything has been removed. This is component 385, the 3-4 shift valve, 386, the 3-4 shift valve spring, and then our bore plug and our retainer. And that galley was under a considerable amount of spring tension. As soon as I removed the retainer, the plug came shooting out, followed by the spring. Okay, our last galley on this face of the valve body is going to be the component 387, the reverse abuse valve, 388, the reverse abuse valve spring. Those are up here in the galley, and then there's a bore plug, bore pin, that's holding in a plug, and then in front of that is the 3-2 downshift valve, component 389, and in front of that is the 3-2 downshift valve spring 390, and then we have our plug again and our retaining clip. All right, all the components are out of this galley for the valve body. So at the very back, we had component 387, the reverse abuse valve. In front of it, 388, the valve spring. Then we had our pin, and then our bore plug. So 360, 359. In front of that, 389, the 3-2 downshift valve, 390, the 3-2 downshift valve spring, our bore plug, and retainer again. Okay, the final components we're going to take out of the valve body are components 370, the 1-2 accumulator valve spring, 371, the 1-2 accumulator valve, and 372, the 1-2 accumulator valve sleeve. They are held in place by a bore pin, component 360, but that pin does not go all the way through, so we'll have to compress the spring a little bit and then try to pry up from underneath to get that pin to come out. Okay, we finally got the last of the valve components out of the last galley. This thing was loaded up with was probably clutch material, I guess, so it was really, really hard to get this out. I had to flood and work the sleeve a lot to finally get it to enough to move and be able to be extracted. So component 370 is the 1-2 accumulator valve spring, 371 is the 1-2 accumulator valve, and then 372 is the 1-2 accumulator valve sleeve, and then we had a pin as well, and that is another component 360. So that is all the components out of the valve body. Now we can do a better job of cleaning up the valve body and getting it ready for rebuild.